The first day of summer hit like a furnace, the kind of heat that makes asphalt shimmer and sends everyone running for shade. I'd been counting down to this moment for weeks, my first swim in the community pool since moving into Sunset Ridge HOA 3 months ago. I grabbed my towel, sunscreen, and a good book, ready for a relaxing Saturday afternoon. The pool area was beautiful, surrounded by palm trees and perfectly manicured hedges. About a dozen residents were already there, lounging on chairs or splashing in the crystal blue water. I found an empty chair near the shallow end, spread out my towel, and was about to dive in when I heard a sharp voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere. "Excuse me. Excuse me." I turned to see a woman marching toward me like she was leading a military charge. She was probably in her late 50s, wearing a designer swimsuit cover-up and oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Can I help you?" I asked, confused. "I'm Deborah Mitchell, head of the pool committee," she announced, crossing her arms over her chest. "And I need to see your pool pass." "Oh, sure." I reached into my bag and pulled out the laminated card I'd received during move-in. "Here you go." Deborah snatched it from my hand, examining it like a detective searching for evidence. Her eyes narrowed behind those expensive sunglasses. "This says you're in Unit 247. "That's right," I confirmed, wondering where this was going. "And you're renting?" She said the word like it tasted bad. "Yes, I'm leasing from the owner, Mr. Patterson." "Is there a problem?" Deborah's smile was colder than the pool water. "I'm afraid there is. The pool is for property owners only. Renters aren't permitted to use the amenities." I felt my stomach drop. That's not what I was told when I signed my lease. Mr. Patterson specifically said I'd have full access to all community facilities. Well, Mr. Patterson doesn't make the rules. The HOA does. She handed my pass back dismissively. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Around us, other residents had stopped their conversations, watching the scene unfold. I saw a few sympathetic faces, but nobody spoke up. "Can you show me where this rule is written?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I'd like to see the actual policy." Deborah's face flushed red. "Are you questioning my authority? I've been on this board for 12 years. I don't need some renter telling me how to do my job." "I'm not trying to cause trouble," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I just want to understand the rules." "The rule is simple: owners only. Now leave, or I'll call security." Humiliated and angry, I gathered my things and walked out, feeling 24 pairs of eyes on my back. But as I reached the gate, an older gentleman followed me out. He was probably in his 70s, with kind eyes and sun-weathered skin. "Hey, don't let Deborah get to you," he said gently. "I'm Frank Rivera, Unit 189. I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never heard of a renters can't use the pool rule." "She's making that up." "Why would she do that?" I asked, wiping away angry tears. Frank sighed. "Deborah thinks she owns this place. She's pushed out 3 families in the past 2 years with her made-up rules and constant harassment. If she decides she doesn't like someone, she makes their life miserable until they leave. But why doesn't someone stop her? Most people are too afraid. She's vindictive, and she has 3 other board members who follow her around like puppies. But between you and me, I'm tired of watching good people get bullied." He pulled out his phone. "Give me your number. I'm going to help you fight this." That evening, Frank came to my apartment with a stack of documents: HOA bylaws, pool regulations, even the original developer's prospectus from when the community was built. We spent 3 hours going through everything. "Look at this," Frank said, pointing to a section in the bylaws. "Pool access is granted to all residents in good standing. Not owners, residents. That includes renters." And here, he flipped to another page, it says the pool committee can't create rules that contradict the bylaws without a full board vote and resident approval. "So she just made it up," I said, anger building in my chest. "Not just made it up, she's been doing this for years. Remember I mentioned 3 families? All renters. All told they couldn't use various amenities. I did some digging after you left today." He pulled out his laptop and showed me a folder full of emails. I reached out to some former residents. Want to hear their stories? For the next hour, Frank shared messages from people Deborah had driven away. A young couple told they couldn't use the gym because their children might damage equipment even though they didn't have children. A single mother banned from community events because her car was too old and unsightly. A retired teacher told she couldn't garden in the community plots because she was just a renter, not a real resident. This is discrimination, I said, my hands shaking. This is illegal. It sure is, Frank smiled. And I think it's time someone did something about it. Are you willing to fight? Absolutely. Frank's plan was brilliant. First, he helped me file a formal complaint with the HOA board, requesting a hearing. He also reached out to Mr. Patterson, my landlord, who was furious when he learned what had happened. Patterson had been paying full HOA fees for years with the understanding that his tenants would have complete access to amenities. The board hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Deborah escalated her campaign. She had security check my credentials every time I walked past the pool. She sent my landlord a letter demanding he control his tenants' disruptive behavior. She even started a whisper campaign, telling neighbors I was aggressive and threatening. But Frank was rallying support too. He organized a meeting at his apartment with 8 other long-term residents who were sick of Deborah's tyranny. They shared their own stories of her bullying and agreed to attend the hearing as witnesses. There's something else you should know, said Maria Chen, a resident from Unit 312. My husband is an accountant, and has been suspicious about the pool maintenance budget for years. Deborah insists we need to spend $5,000 a month on pool upkeep, which seems excessive. He requested to see the receipts last year, and Deborah refused. Can he request them again? I asked. Already done, Maria's husband, James, said with a grin. As a board member, I have the right to review all financial documents. I submitted a formal request this morning. If she refuses, that's a violation of state HOA law. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I would say, going over the documents Frank had helped me prepare. But I also felt something new, hope. For the first time since moving here, I wasn't alone. The community center was packed for the hearing. Deborah sat at the board table with her 3 allies, all women who looked like they shopped at the same boutique and got their hair done at the same salon. The president, Tom Martinez, seemed uncomfortable, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. We're here to address a complaint from Unit 247, Tom began. Ms. Sarah Mitchell. Johnson, I corrected. Sarah Johnson. Right, sorry. Ms. Johnson claims she was unfairly denied pool access. Deborah, would you like to respond? Deborah stood up, her voice dripping with condescension. Mr. President, this is quite simple. We have a long-standing policy that the pool is for owners only. Ms. Johnson is a renter. She doesn't qualify. I don't understand why we're wasting everyone's time with this. Can you point to where this policy is written? I asked, standing up. It's common knowledge, Deborah snapped. Frank stood next, holding up the bylaws. Actually, Section 4.2 states that all residents in good standing have access to community amenities. There's no distinction between owners and renters. Deborah, you've created a rule that doesn't exist and violated the HOA's own governing documents. Deborah's face turned purple. This is absurd. I've been managing that pool for 12 years. And apparently making up rules for 12 years, Maria added, standing up. I'd also like to raise concerns about the pool budget. My husband requested financial records 3 days ago, as is his right as a board member, and you've refused to provide them. Why is that, Deborah? The room erupted in whispers. Tom looked panicked. Deborah, is this true? I've been busy. I'll get him the records when I have time. State law requires you to provide them within 48 hours of a board member's request, James said calmly, pulling out his phone. That deadline passed yesterday. I've already filed a complaint with the state HOA ombudsman. Now other residents started standing up, emboldened by Frank's group. A man in the back shared how Deborah had told him he couldn't attend community barbecues because he was too new. A woman described being harassed about her garden decorations until she removed them, even though they violated no written rules. One by one, people who'd been silent for years found their voices. Deborah was visibly shaking. "You people are ganging up on me. After everything I've done for this community." "Like what?" Frank challenged. "Like driving away good residents. Like making up rules to exclude people you don't like. Like possibly mismanaging pool funds." Tom finally showed some backbone. "This hearing is getting out of hand. I'm calling for an emergency vote. All in favor of suspending Deborah from the pool committee pending a full investigation into these allegations?" Every hand in the room went up except Deborah and her two friends. Even Tom voted yes. "What?" Deborah shrieked. "You can't do this to me." "I just did," Tom said quietly. "You're suspended, effective immediately. James, I'm appointing you to oversee a complete audit of the pool accounts. Frank, can you chair a committee to review our access policies and make sure they align with our bylaws?" "It would be my pleasure," Frank said, smiling at me. Deborah grabbed her designer purse and stormed out, her two friends hurrying after her. The room erupted in applause. The investigation took 3 weeks. What they found was shocking. Deborah had been inflating pool maintenance costs and pocketing the difference, nearly $47,000 over 6 years. She'd been submitting fake invoices from a maintenance company that turned out to be her nephew's shell corporation. The board filed a police report, and Deborah was charged with embezzlement. But it got better. Once people started looking into her other activities, they discovered she'd been running similar schemes with the landscaping budget and community event funds. In total, she'd stolen over $100,000 from the HOA. The legal process took months, but eventually, Deborah pleaded guilty to avoid trial. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, 5 years probation, and ordered to pay back every penny, plus damages. Her house went up for sale immediately. She needed to pay her restitution and legal fees. As for the community, everything changed. Tom stepped down as president, admitting he'd been too intimidated by Deborah to lead effectively. Frank was elected as the new president, with Maria as vice president. Their first act was to formally apologize to every resident Deborah had harassed and to reach out to former residents she'd driven away. They also completely rewrote the community policies, making them clear, fair, and accessible to everyone. A new rule was added: any resident, owner, or renter had equal access to all amenities. The pool committee was expanded to include diverse voices, and all financial records were published online monthly for complete transparency. 3 months after that horrible day when Deborah kicked me out of the pool, I was back there on another scorching Saturday. This time, nobody questioned my right to be there. Frank waved at me from the deep end, where he was teaching his grandson to swim. Maria and James were having a barbecue by the pavilion, and they'd invited half the complex. As I floated on my back, staring up at the cloudless blue sky, a young woman approached the pool gate nervously. She looked new, uncertain. "Hi," I called out, swimming over. "Are you new here?" "I'm Sarah." "I'm Jen," she said, smiling. "I just moved into Unit 198. I'm renting from the owner. Is it okay if I use the pool?" "Absolutely," I said, grinning. "Everyone's welcome here. Come on in, the water's perfect." She dove in with a splash, and I watched her surface with a huge smile. It was such a simple thing, a swim on a hot day. But it meant everything. Because now, nobody had to fight for the right to belong. Nobody had to face a bully alone. And everyone knew that this community was strong enough to stand up for what was right. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange and pink, Frank climbed out of the pool and sat on the edge next to me. "You know what the best part of all this is?" he asked. "What's that?" "You showed people they could fight back. 3 families left because of Deborah. But you stayed. You fought. And because you did, this whole community is better." He patted my shoulder. "Never underestimate what one person standing up can accomplish." I looked around at the happy, relaxed faces of my neighbors, my community. I couldn't have done it alone. "Nobody ever does," Frank said wisely. "But somebody has to be brave enough to take the first step. That was you, Sarah." You should be proud. As the stars began to appear overhead and the pool lights flickered on, casting everything in a magical blue glow, I realized he was right. What started as humiliation and anger had transformed into something beautiful, a community that looked out for each other, that stood together against injustice, and that refused to let bullies win. Deborah Mitchell had tried to make me feel small, to push me out, to steal my simple joy of a summer swim. Instead, she'd sparked a revolution that brought down her empire of lies and made Sunset Ridge HOA a place where everyone truly belonged. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.